Hello, Medfield. This is Ann Thompson. I want to introduce you to the newest edition of Medfield People. My guest today is Peter Butler, who I met at the bridge table, and he'll be leaving here to go play bridge again. That's how he spends his life, I think. Peter had polio as a child, and he is going to talk a lot about it. I had a neighbor who had grown up with polio. I've had kids in my classes that have had polio in neighborhoods. Swimming pools were closed in my time in the 40s because of polio. And most people today have never really seen what infantile paralysis is like unless they read about FDR and see what he went through. So my guest, Peter Butler, can you tell us what you found about when you got polio?
Okay, I had polio in the epidemic of 1952, which is obviously a little bit after the Ann's period, but not much. It was a very major epidemic, and as a result of that, I ended up being in a polio hospitals for almost a whole year.
Where?
I came down with the illness when we were on a family vacation. We were camping out on Long Island, and we were out on the eastern end, and I was an 8-year-old who was running up and down the sand dunes, and I was doing that every day, 10, 20 times. And eventually I became very tired and didn't feel well. And of course, we were all aware of what polio and the problems and the concerns in the summer times. And so we aborted our vacation and went back home to New Jersey where we lived. And I just got sicker and sicker.
Sicker like what, Peter? Like fever?
Well, it's a strange disease. You started out like with a sore throat. And then you sort of developed symptoms like you were coming down with a flu. Like you would get vomiting, and you might have diarrhea, and you would ache all over. But the first thing that happens is you get a sore throat, which is why it's confusing. You think you just have a sore throat. But that's where the virus enters into the body. It comes through, that's how it gets into you. Okay. And then it's like then you started to ache all over, and then you started to have very high temperatures, and eventually after about a week at home, they put me into they decided this is what I had polio, and I was taken to the Perth Amboy Hospital, New Jersey, and there I was there for what they determined was the contagious period. So I stayed there in a ward which maybe had 4 or 5 other kids. I don't really remember much about that. And there I was, looked at all around the clock, and eventually it stopped. But at the time it stopped, I was stiff. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't stand. I was in not very good shape, hurt all over. And so I was sent from there. There was a system at the time of children's hospitals around. I went to a place called the Children's Country Home, which was in Mountainside, New Jersey. And it was in a very pastoral setting, just off Route 22. You can't see it from Route 22, those of you who know New Jersey. And it was a very big facility, and it had 2 big wings. One wing was for the boys, and one wing was for the girls. And the place was divided between age groups. So there was a ward for the real little kids, and then there was another ward, which when I got there was empty, and then there was the other ward, which was for the bigger guys, and they had the same thing at the other end for the girls. And these wards each had about 12 beds in the ward I was in. I think where they had the little kids, they probably had more beds. But there was probably, the hospital probably had a capacity of 75 people or something like that. And when the time I got there, I was no longer deemed to be contagious, but I basically couldn't do much. And so by the time that was there, I was the course of treatment that they put onto me is that the first thing they had to do was they had to loosen my body up so that I could start to sit or do other things.
Did your body feel stiff at that point, the whole body?
It was stiff and it was tough. I couldn't move things.
Could you move your hands even?
I could move my hands, and I could move my my arms. I was fortunate, though I'll explain that later. But there's one type of polio which is terrible, which is called the bulbar, which is the one that affects your breathing. And those are the kids that you see in the pictures that end up being in the iron lungs.
Oh, yeah.
And those were the ones that were, the real basket cases. But they had a device that artificially breathed for them, but their chance of recovery was very, very slim. So they just had a vegetable existence. And those of us who had polio, most people tended to have it in one arm or one leg or one side. I was fortunate because I had it on both sides. And the reason this turned out to be fortunate is because the kids who had it on one side, it would affect their growing plane. So the kids who had it in their left leg and not the right leg, as they would grow, all of a sudden they'd have a 1 or 2 inch difference in their leg heights.
That's my neighbor.
And so my legs are, exactly the same. And that, so that as I progressed, they were able to rehabilitate me, I didn't have to deal with a series of other problems that these other children had. And I also was fortunate in that while I did have it in my arms, I had a very, very mild case in one, and the other arm was almost non-existent as a case. So my left arm is a little bit weaker than my right, but so that was where I was defined as having to be rehabilitated.
Did it affect your neck at all?
No.
And not your back?
But my back, yes.
Oh, your back is.
So what the treatment was to, they used to put us in what they called packs, hot packs. And these were basically, they had, this is dating myself to these viewers because most people in those days had wringer washing machines.
I had a wringer washing machine.
You had a tub, which is a thing with generated around, and then you had a thing as you pulled it out that and what they did is they had these washing machines in the ward with very hot water. And they would cut pieces of felt, which they would stick in the water, in the boiling, as hot as they could, and then they would wring the water out. So they had these hot packs, which were like 120, 130 degrees.
Oh my God.
And then they would lay them on your back or your leg or whatever. And they had two series of things that they did. They either did what they called hot packs, where they would change them every 10 minutes. So there was a nurse, somebody who was putting it on you, and then they would take it off and put it back on. It always felt very good at first, but then it cooled off quickly. Mm-hmm. And then they had another system which they used sometimes, which is that they put the hot pack on and they would wrap it with kind of like an insulating thing and leave it on for like an hour. And those I always hated because by the time they got towards the end of the hour, they got itchy. As they dried out, they itched in, and so you wanted to scratch them. And of course, I couldn't move and I couldn't scratch anyway. But they were kind of like a torture. And this was done. These treatments were done every day, and they were done in coordination with other activities. So they would put on the hot packs, the 10-minute routines, and then you would go to a room where a physical therapist would work on you. So there they would try to stretch your legs and get some movement. And basically what they were doing is you had no motion in your limbs, so they were tightened up and they needed to be stretched again so that the joints would move and so forth.
Didn't it hurt?
Yes.
Like how bad?
Well, so you'd scream sometimes. So they didn't just go like this because you couldn't do it. You would be resisting and and so it would take forever. And as an example, I went to the hospital in August, and it wasn't until January that they had me vertical for the first time. And I wasn't even standing on my feet. They had me on taped to a board.
Lying flat all that time.
Lying flat for that long. And so that was a series of, just keep doing this, and gradually, as things loosened up, they would do it. But let me just digress for a second to explain a little bit about what polio does after you get it, because then I'll come back to the rehabilitation. What polio is it's a virus that's in water, and it comes basically from fecal matter from animals. It's been around for eons.
I didn't know that's where it came from.
Yeah, and like I say, it's a natural occurring virus, and it's, in my opinion, I subscribe to this theory. I don't know that everybody does, but it's an example of how civilization has gone against Mother Nature, because when it's naturally occurring, so as children were born around the world, most of them got a natural immunity because every water they took had a little bit of this in it, and so your body created natural antibodies. And as we became more civilized in the 18th and 19th centuries, we had water treatment facilities and things like that. So all of a sudden you started to remove this contaminant from the water streams, and then you had, after several generations, people had no longer the antibodies built inside them. So then when they were exposed to the antibiotics, they caught the disease, where in the past they didn't have it.
When was the first case diagnosed? Do you have any idea?
Oh, they have a picture of, I looked in my book the other day, just since you said you were going to ask me something. There's actually in one of the tombs in ancient Egypt, there's a stone which is carved, and they describe it showing as a person who has a deformed leg, who they claim, the cryptologist or whoever they are, who claim that this is an example of how polio was treated way back then.
Wow.
So it's been around for a long, long time, and it's a percentage game. By that I mean there's about like 1,000 cases of polio, like 95% of them, it's just like a case of the flu. So most people who suffered polio, they had a 2-week thing, and that would be the end of it. It was the other 5% that was the problem. Probably 4 to 4.5% of that 100% probably ended up with conditions like I had, and the last 0.5% were the ones who got the bulb or who ended up in the iron lungs or died. So it was, to most of the people, it was just a minor setback like having the seasonal flu. But those who got the stronger cases, ended up being paralyzed for life or, disadvantaged for life.
Now, I can remember being told not to go to swimming pools.
Yep.
And not to go to the movies.
Yep. Well, yeah. And when I was,
they were the two big things that we were told.
And
not
I
to
was
do.
a kid, is that people kept out. They didn't want to go swimming pools or lakes or anything like that.
Yeah,
they didn't let kids go to camp and things like that in the summertime.
Absolutely.
And the outbreaks usually occurred in the United States in the summertime, July and August, September, and they just it was a fear. It was kind of like I remember as a boy, the year before I had it, there was a epidemic too, but not as bad as the one I was in. And I remember the panic. It was almost like the AIDS scare a while ago. It was, oh, what are you going to do? Nobody knew, and it was really concerned, because if your child came down with it, what they could do to help you out was rather limited. And what I wanted to describe here is what actually polio does.
All right.
What polio, the virus, when it gets into your body, what it does is it attacks your nervous system. So what it does, and I'm not sure exactly how it does this, but the net result is that it causes your, I don't want to say it kills it, but somehow it causes some of your nerves to die. I don't know how it does that, but anyway, what it does is back up for a second. The anatomy, you have muscles, but what makes your muscles work is a nerve. And what it does, the polio kills that nerve, so it doesn't allow a muscle to work.
Really?
So that's what the disease does. It's the virus attacks the nerves, and it kills them, which causes you to lose mobility. So in the bulbar cases, it goes into it causes the nerves that cause the lungs to work, not to function. And the ones that go in your legs or wherever, they allow you to lose the muscle tone. And it comes somehow through the spinal cord. But basically, the thing to remember is what it's done is it causes the paralysis and so forth, which it causes. It's not caused by attacking the muscles per se. It's attacked by killing the nerve that causes the muscle to work, which
Now,
then allows you to do things.
Does the pain end when the nerve has done its job, attacking the muscles, or does the pain go on and on and on the whole time?
The pain was more from the fact that you couldn't move, and then when you started to move, you know, it's like you're stretching something and it hurts. So eventually, it was an ache more, I guess is a better way to say it. When I was first sick, it was an ache, and then as you came up with it was the pain was from the rehabilitation, trying to get the joints to move again, and you know, when you try to stretch and touch your toes, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what the disease did. So if that's somewhat clear, let me then go on to talk about what the rehabilitation process was, because after we did these hot packs and they started doing these motions, and then as I stretched you out, you know, they started doing exercises and so forth. And we would see a therapist twice a day, and so this hospital had little rooms where they, you know, just like you would have in the physical therapy rooms today. You know, you'd be on a table and they would massage you and they would exercise you and do sorts of things. But the progress was very slow. And basically what they were doing is, the first thing they were doing is trying to limber you up so you had motion again. And then the second thing they had to do was that what they basically were doing is teaching your body to do work that wasn't natural. So for instance, what happens is when you still have the muscle there, but you don't have a nerve to make it work. So what the physical training was doing, and I don't know how they do this or what actually how it worked, but basically the nerve that was next to it that fired some other muscle was taught, induced somehow.
For Pete's sake.
So it would cause the muscle that's used the nerve that's used to fire muscle B, it also picked up the duties of muscle A. So all of a sudden now, as we were rehabilitated and we were able to use these muscles again, because this little nerve that was supposed to do this job was now doing double or triple duty. And with that, as we got motion back and forth and we were able to move things, we were able to you know, start to try to get to the stage where we could recover and be decent.
But you finally got out of the hospital.
Oh yeah, it was a long time.
And then back to school? How did you manage going back to school?
Oh, let me back up for a second.
Okay.
Just, I was in the hospital, like I say, for years. So I missed a whole year, and I missed my whole 5th grade. The hospital had a school teacher, and we had a one-room school, and we would go down, the kids who were in, you know, she had, I guess, I don't know how many sessions she had, maybe 4 sessions a day. So the 1st and 2nd graders were here and so on. So we would have a group of kids, and we would have a program from our home school. So I lived in Metuchen, New Jersey, so they had my books and whatever, and so I was trying to generally following the curriculum of what Metuchen was teaching. And so we did that for a year. But I wanted to just tell you one incident, which I told you in the car one night, about how the panic that existed among the populace at that time. I was in the polio hospital, and this was probably September or October, I don't remember when. So this was 2 months after, and I was not in very good shape. You know, I couldn't move, but you know, I was alive and I was eating, and I was in good spirits because we had TV. We didn't have TV at home at the time, so this was, you know, something that was decent. But I came down with what was diagnosed as an attack appendicitis. And of course, this was a rehabilitation hospital with no facilities like this, so they had to, my father made arrangements, and the local ambulance came up to Mountainside, which is a trip of about 30 miles, and took me down to New Brunswick to St. Peter's Hospital to have my appendix taken care of. And while I was no longer deemed contagious by the medical profession, everybody there, this was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
So here I am coming into this hospital, and they finally decided they put me in a private room.
Like a leopard almost?
Almost like I was leopard. And this was a Catholic hospital, and they decided that they would only allow one person to come into the room. And so there was this little old nun who was a nurse, and I was in this hospital for 5 days, and this woman almost died while I was there because she had to be there 24 hours a day.
Oh.
So when I needed a bedpan in the middle of the night, she was there. She was there to give me my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, and everything else. And of course, I couldn't move and do much. And so I was kind of an oddity, and I remember kids being walked in the hall in the hospital, just like they do today, is they try to get you up walking right away. And these kids would walk by the door, and they'd look in, and what's this in there, type of thing. And their mothers were saying, no, hurry up, get away. It was like I had leopard. And to try and keep my legs from getting worse, I had left the polio hospital. They had my legs wrapped in splints to kind of keep them positioned properly. And the whole time I was there, no one did anything with them. So it's like leaving a Band-Aid on your body for a week.
Yeah.
And so when I got back to the children's country home, again taken by ambulance, and they gave me the big thrill. They put the siren on, so we rode up Route 22 and went through all the red lights and all that type of stuff, which I thought was exciting. But when we got back there, the first thing the nurses did at the children's country home was they took these splints off, and my legs were all green with mold, and it was just, but this was caused by the fact that it was like, keep away from him, keep away from him. So that was a little side story of just to show you the impact that the general populace had on concerns about polio.
That I do remember, because my friend Rosemary Hayes had it, and we weren't allowed to go visit Rosemary.
Yes.
We weren't allowed at all. We could call her on the telephone, we could send her a letter, but we couldn't open a letter. If Rosemary sent us a letter back, we weren't supposed to open it.
And
I still remember that.
I was in the hospital for a total of 11 months, and I saw my brother and sister, I think 4 times during that period. And they were usually, Sunday was Visitors' Day, and my parents would come up for Visitors' Day, and my brother and sister would sit in the car while the general visiting hours. Then after the visiting hours, they would bundle me up on a stretcher and put me outside on a closed-in play area, and my brother and sister would be brought to the other side of it, and there was kind of like a fence, and we could see each other and talk to each other. But and I'd see them for like 15 minutes. I remember doing it one day in a really cold day, and it was just, there's not enough hospital blankets you can put over yourself to go outside in the wintertime.
How scared and lonely did you feel as a little kid?
I didn't really feel lonely because there was, I had 11 other guys in the ward with me. So.
But not your family, not your
They weren't my
regular
family,
friends.
but they weren't my regular friends, but we made friends.
Good.
We made friends. And, as I got better, we used to have wheelchair races in the mornings and do things like that, just like little boys would do.
Sure.
But what I missed was the home environment, and it was always a routine. I know it was good for me to be there, and it was a long, long recovery, but I couldn't wait to get out. I couldn't wait to get out.
I bet you couldn't.
But
then you finally did get out and back to school?
I got at home, and the first, so I missed 5th grade, and I came back, and I got I got a report card from going to school in the country home with a little certificate, and they said I was promoted to the 6th grade. So when I got home, I could go to the 6th grade. And when I started going to the 6th grade, this was a problem because I no longer I had to use crutches. I had braces, and I couldn't walk very far. So I had to be driven to school by my mother, this was a problem because we only had one car.
Mm-hmm.
So we had
in those days.
In those days, and so that was a problem. And I didn't. So when we started out, I guess I probably went to school half day because in those days you used to get. There was no such thing as school cafeterias. And until before I had polio, we would go walk to school in the morning. We'd get out of school at noon. We'd walk home, be home for 15 minutes, eat our sandwich, walk back to school.
That's exactly what we did.
And it was 1.25 miles, so each way.
Yeah, that's about what we had.
And it was just part of what we
did. It was healthy.
But that was no longer something I could do.
Absolutely.
So I started out going half day for a while, and gradually over the year, it worked up so that I was ended up, I guess, by the end of my the 6th grade, probably in the spring, I was probably going to school all day. But again, it was a chore because I had to be picked up at noontime and taken home and brought back to school afterwards. And so it was 3 round trips for my mother driving the car, and it was just it was a chore.
Same thing in high school. Same routine.
No, because as I progressed, I got so that I could walk, and I got to be a paper boy. So I was.
You're kidding.
No, I had I was a paper boy. It was interesting. I could ride a bike, but I rode basically with one leg and a hand. So this leg would be always pushed with a hand.
Oh, okay.
So by the time I could ride a bike and I had a paper route, I was able to ride my bike to school, and which made it a little easier for my mother. I remember one thing in going through school, I was always excused from gym, so I never took gym. I would sit in someplace and study or do something. And when we had fire drills and things like that, I had permission not to have to walk down, because and that was, as an aside, I was really lucky, because in Metuchen we needed new schools and we were short-handed, so we went to split sessions. So one group of kids went in the morning and one in the afternoon.
We had that in Dale Street here.
Yep.
For my kids.
And so we had an old school, which was called Franklin School, which was the junior high / high school, and high school went in the morning. Junior high, which I was in at the time, went in the afternoon. And one day, and it was a 3-story old building, and I was up on the 3rd floor in art class, and they had what sounded like a fire alarm.
Oh, God.
And everybody went. I didn't go out, and then I smelled smoke. So fortunately, I decided I better walk down. And walking down was a chore. I need railings and take my time. I would be swept up in a stampede very easily, or I would cause a stampede because I go slower. So it was never safe for me to be out there when there were other people, because I would hurt them. Not only get hurt, but I would cause other people to get hurt. So anyway, I was fortunate that I got out of it. The school actually burned down, and so the school burned down. So that was fortunate. And we spent the rest of the year being bused. The city of Perth Amboy, which was 8 miles away, was kind enough to make a deal with Metuchen, so they had their high school go from the morning, and then all the kids in Metuchen were bused over the 8 miles to Perth Amboy. We got there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and started school.
Oh, jeepers.
And we went to school till 6:30 there, and then we, driven back home. And but I was able to, I could walk to the bus stop, and got around basically okay. And by that time I was in high school, I guess when I was in 8th grade, I got rid of my braces. My feet used to flop out like this, and the braces were to hold them straight. And they had what I call muscle transplants. I think they basically were tendon transplants, but I don't know. I got all sorts of beautiful scars on both legs, where basically what they did is they took a tissue, tendon, muscle, whatever, from the outside of the leg, and put it on the inside of the leg. And so my feet don't flop out, and which then allowed me to get rid of my braces, which, as a 13-year-old, this is, hey, no one has to look at me and, what's this? Didn't make me walk any better or, allow me to do anything more, but it just got rid of that stigma in my mind. And
you made it out of high school.
Made it out of high school.
And then you went to college.
And I went to college.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Carnegie Tech.
Oh, did you?
In
I
Pittsburgh.
Didn't know that.
And I was an engineer. And those days I got around pretty good. I still had a trick knee that sometimes would go out on me. I remember one night after standing in front of a girl's dormitory after a date, bending over to kiss her, and my knee went, and I went, and
I assume this was not Irene, the girl you
no,
married?
no. Of course.
Did she laugh, or did you laugh? Or?
No one knew what to do. But then I recovered by saying, "Wow, what a kiss!" But,
hey, that's pretty good. For a teenager, that is pretty good.
But I got around pretty good. When I was a young man in college, I basically could do everything. Carnegie Tech is an unusual school. Was founded by Andrew Carnegie, and one of the requirements to graduate is you had to be a swimmer. So everybody had to take swimming as a physical education course, and if you were not a swimmer, you could not graduate. So no one who graduated from Carnegie Tech was not a swimmer.
Would you believe we had that same rule at the University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
I went to Penn, and the only reason that I was excused from that was because I was on the varsity swim team. So then I was okay. I didn't have to do the up and back for I've forgotten how many lanes. But that was a requirement at Penn when I went there. But my daughter went there 20 years later. It was no longer a requirement.
And it's really a good idea, because you look at how many people don't know how to swim. And
Absolutely.
it's so stupid. They don't know not how to swim. And but anyway, so I was able. Since I couldn't do the other gyms, I swam all the time, and I still swim today all the time.
Where do you swim now?
I have a pool at home, so I swim basically every day, and then I have one of these endless pools, which is it's a tank in my basement, which I have has a current, so I swim against the current. It's not as fun as swimming outdoors in the sunshine, but it's exercise in the wintertime.
Now, I want to ask you about something that several people asked me to ask you. My old next-door neighbor, Bev Hallowell, had polio when she was 5. She was the same age as I. And she got it in 1939. And she had what she called a recurrence.
Okay.
And I had asked, when I first met you, I asked you about this. Now, Bev said it was a recurrence. She thought it was a recurrence. It was worse, she thought, more painful than she remembered when she was a little kid. Yeah. And she was, I'd say, in her maybe 50 when it came back or whatever. Could you address that for a couple people?
I've had that too, and they call it now the post-polio syndrome. And I lived basically a pretty normal life. I was in business, and I traveled all the time by airplane. So I was always seen walking around airports, no crutches. I would have a bag. Yes, I have a limp, but I basically got around by myself on my own, rent cars and do all that other good stuff. And then in my 50s, I started to feel weaker, and I started to fall more often, and I started to having breaking bones, and basically what it was determined is that I suffered from what I think your friend thought, which was post-polio syndrome, and what they've determined, and I don't know that it's been fully determined. The theory that I subscribe to, which is professed by the doctors I've used, is that what happens is that the nerves that we started working with, doing double and triple duty, after 30, 40, 50 years, they start dying off.
They're exhausted.
They're exhausted. And basically what you're finding out is that now you're used to walking at a certain pace, doing certain things. So now all of a sudden, as you lose your ability to use that muscle, you're causing another muscle to work harder, which is what's causing you to be tired and causing the increased pain, because you're putting strain on that muscle that's not intended to be there. And so what basically we've had to do here is we've had to learn to moderate our activities. And there's really no treatment for it, but basically what it is my leg has further atrophied from what they were before, because they're muscles that I was working with for a number of years no longer can work now, because there's no nerve left to fire them.
Yeah.
And I know at one time a lot of people had some belief that you could regenerate nerve tissue. And you may remember the Christopher Reeve, the movie actor went over the horse and broke his
Yep.
spinal column, and they were all sort of hoping to keep him alive so they could figure out a way to do that. Well, they never had, but you know, as a polio victim, if they could figure out a way to do it, yeah, I was all for that
Maybe
too.
someday they will.
Who knows? Who knows? But so it's come back to lots of people, and it's really just almost like part of the normal aging, and it's not a reoccurrence of the disease, and it's just a result of the activity.
Okay. And now, thank God, we have Salk vaccine, Sabin vaccine.
Yes.
Which one came first? Do you remember
Yes,
the shot? Was it the shot and then the sugar cube?
Actually, the first one, which most people forget, the first actual vaccine, which was created by a Polish doctor, and his was very complicated, and then Salk invented his,
Okay.
and Salk's was an injection,
Mm-hmm.
and when that came out, that was big news because
It was great. I couldn't
everybody
wait.
got
I
everybody.
couldn't wait to get my kids there.
And in those days, I had those shots too, because no one knew whether it would come back or whether I was immune or what. Because a lot of the things I described weren't known back in the 50s. And then a couple of years later, the Sabin came up with his system. And his system is different in terms of how it works. It doesn't use live tissues and things like that. And it's much less costly to manufacture. So it's become the way to go. And the only downside of it, and it's the small downside, is that you have to take it 3 times. The Sabin, it's basically what is a sugar cube with a drop of this stuff on it. And each child takes it 3 times, and that does it. And I encourage every parent who's asked to do this, you should do it, because the consequence of catching polio and being one of the unlucky 5% is it's horrendous. It changes your whole life. There's things I've never been able to do. I haven't run since I was 8 years old, and there's just a whole series of things that I don't even consider doing because I can't do.
I remember when the vaccines came out, the lines trying to get in to get those shots were unbelievable.
Yes.
And we waited. I couldn't tell you with my kids. I think I only had 4 kids at the time, but we were living in Levittown near Trenton, New Jersey, and I remember the lines just mind-boggling. And their neighbors were all going. We all go, and we all threw up these kids in the car, and we all go together. And,
Yep.
and we'd wait, and we were so thrilled that it was finally something available to save our kids from
Right.
what you went through.
Right.
And a lot of other people went
Right.
through.
And you see these pictures in the third world, in the poverty. You see these young people who, they're sitting on a little like dolly, and they push themselves along in the street. Those are just more victims of polio. They don't have access to, medical technology or the expense of the things to do it. And that's, they have to create a living or create a way to survive, and it's avoidable. It's avoidable.
I hope your message of let's prevent it from recurring again from our kids, your kids, their grandkids, etc. Be wonderful if we saw the end of polio at some point.
Yeah, and it's getting to the point where that's good, but there's still too many places in the world where people for either religious or some other silly reason choose not to get them vaccinated or take this, and same thing true in the United States.
Sure.
And what happens is that this can come back at any time, and you don't want to get it. You do not want to get it.
Well, thank you so much, Peter.
Okay.
It was great to have you come and talk to us all, and I hope everybody listens. Make sure your kids get the inoculation.
Amen.
Make sure they do.
Amen.
Make sure they do, and save them from going through everything you had to go through and all the fun and pleasure you missed in life.
Yep.
Production support provided by Medfield.tv. Access to our community.